Has a team in the top 3 of the NFL draft just opened up the door for the Raiders to make a move? That plus a whole lot more comes up on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast for April 19th, 2024.
Just win. Just win. Just win. Just win.
The autumn wind is a raider, pillaging just for fun. He'll knock you round and upside down and laugh when he's conquered and won. And won. And won. And won. And won.
And welcome in, Raider Nation, to another edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Thank you so much for making the show your first listen of the day. Make sure you subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. To get the latest edition of the show as soon as it becomes available, as always, if you're giving us a look on YouTube, appreciate you. Show continues to grow each and every day. It's because of you and because of my man Ari. Does a fantastic job each and every day making sure we're on YouTube, we're looking good, and we're sounding good. Appreciate you, Ari. On Twitter, at Ari Producers. You can hit me up as well, at your boy Q254. And we got the Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line at 707-654-4693. Your feedback's coming up in segment number 3 of today's show as we close out the week. Your calls and texts, again, 707-654-4693. If you haven't locked that number in, just lock it in. A lot of times people hit me up on Twitter. Q, what's that number again? 707-654-4693. In segment number 2, Daniel Jeremiah from the NFL Network had his pre-draft conference call, the final one before he's in Detroit next week, and we'll have an opportunity to catch up with him there. Looking forward to that. But last pre-draft conference call that he had that on Wednesday. I have a few sound bites that I want you to hear. You'll do that coming up in segment number 2, all things NFL draft related. Here in segment number 1, just news and notes, whatever I was able to collect, and we'll jump right into it after I tell you about the title sponsor, which is Monopoly Go. And I admit it, I've said it many times, I've got a competitive side, and the competitive side of me is a big fan of Monopoly Go, the mobile hit twist on classic Monopoly. Join your friends, download Monopoly Go, now free on the App Store or Google Play. I'll tell you a lot more about them later on in the show. Off top, a lot of folks have been asking me, what did you do on the Locked On mock draft, Q? What did your, who was your pick and why? And some people found out about it. I talked about it on my radio show, so some people heard it a little bit early. The mock draft is already out. The Locked On Podcast Network put it out, so a lot of people heard it already. But if you did not hear it, here is my selection at number 13 overall. I was not able to trade up. I tried to trade up. Couldn't do it. They didn't pick up the phone. They didn't answer. I actually found out a funny story about them trying to make the move at number 2. I had tried to trade up. They tried to counter trade, and I said, nah, unless you could lock it in, I don't want to do it. And apparently they were trying to set up a 3 or 4 team, kind of trade, and were really trying to work their magic, and they weren't able to do anything at all. It ended up, falling kind of flat on their face. So it didn't work out at number 2 the way that they thought it was going to. But that was okay. I was very comfortable with sticking at number 13. So here's what I did at number 13, and here's the reason why I did it. And then you'll hear a little bit of analysis from the Locked On mock draft. Check it out.
Your boy Q ready to go with the selection for the Las Vegas Raiders at pick 13 in the Locked On mock draft special.
With the 13th pick in the Locked On NFL mock draft, the Las Vegas Raiders select Terrion Arnold, cornerback, Alabama. Now, I went with Terrion Arnold from Alabama at the number 13th overall pick after multiple efforts to get up to the number 2 spot for the Raiders to select their quarterback of the future in Jaden Daniels, but it was a no-go when it came to the Washington Commanders and the Raiders coming to an agreement. So I thought, why not go ahead the way that the mock draft is shaking out and go get an alpha dog at the secondary position. The Raiders had a really good defense in 2023. Head coach Antonio Pierce has talked about multiple times how he needs that alpha dog across from Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs, a couple members of the Raiders secondary that they have right now. You get Terrion Arnold, a guy with all the confidence in the world, a guy with a lot of ball production. All of a sudden you have a very stingy secondary to go with that defensive line led by Christian Wilkins, Max Crosby, and last year's number 1 overall pick, 7th overall pick in the first round, Tyree Wilson. So the Raiders get an alpha dog in their secondary with cornerback Terrion Arnold out of Alabama.
And it is cornerback going defense is the Las Vegas Raiders at pick 13. Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama. Damian, you talked about your corners and how you had them ranked. Where does Terrion Arnold fit in here with this group? Is he worthy of a top 13 pick in the NFL draft?
I think he's up there, right? He's one of my he's around that 3rd, 4th spot, battling up over there with Kool-Aid, with his teammate Kool-Aid McKinstry. I think what he brings is toughness, right? A guy that's very willing tackler in the run game. You pop on, I think it was the SEC championship game against Georgia. They try, it's like 4th and 1. They throw a toss, sweep out to his side. He blows up the block, makes a big tackle on a bigger running back that's trying to work downhill on him. A guy that's really fluid in terms of his movement, being able to swivel and flip his hips, turn, and be able to run with receivers. But he's got really good ball skills, really competitive. And for a guy who's played safety and corner, you could throw him into the nickel. You could do a lot of different things with him in terms of coverage. I like the pick. I think it would be a Antonio Pierce type of pick if he's trying to add another corner to his room.
And Matt, they've been trying to fix that secondary for a long time in Las Vegas. And even though it's not a big player that they drafted, still some toughness. How do you like the fit for Arnold with the Raiders?
I don't have a lot of qualms with it. I mean, the back seven, particularly corner, needed addressed. And this is a team that has plenty of needs, but they did fix their defensive line, spent money there. I think the offense, as we talked about before they made the pick, is really weak on the right side of the O-line. I mean, I think DJ Fluker is penciled in as the right guard. I mean, I didn't even know he was still in the league. And, Fuaga or Latham would have been my pick, but splitting hairs, Arnold's a good fit as well.
So there was right there. Terrion Arnold, cornerback out of Alabama, is who I went with at number 13. And remember, if you remember back when I started talking about the Locked On mock draft, like we do each and every year, I said I had a big board. And I said if I couldn't trade up to number 2, what was I going to do? I was going to get the best cornerback that was still on the board. Quinyon Mitchell was already gone. I took Terrion Arnold. I was fine with that. I'm a big fan of Terrion Arnold anyway. I was going to take the best cornerback. I was going to take either the best offensive tackle, best defensive tackle, or Michael Penix. So I just went in order and took my top cornerback, which was Terrion Arnold. So that's what I did at number 13. Some people like it, some people didn't. You can hear the reaction from the guys there. And it's so funny. I felt like that they really don't know the Raiders too much. Those guys, Matt Williamson, I know he was one of them, was talking about the Raiders have so many holes, and they're basically lumped them in with the Denver Broncos. And I'm thinking, yeah, they really haven't spent too much time with the Raiders. And that's okay. I get it. They cover the whole NFL. But it seems like every time that I talk about the Raiders or I make a pick for the Raiders or they critique the Raiders, they always bring the hammer a little bit more. And, basically whenever I speak on the Raiders and if I say anything good, it's pretty much of a, yeah, okay. They don't really believe it, which is okay. That's fine. Let the Raiders fly under the radar and let the others find out sooner rather than later. Well, we found out on Thursday, a bunch of different GMs and coaches talked to the media. Tom Telesco from the Raiders, he'll actually speak to the media on Monday. I won't be there. I'll be in Detroit already, so I won't be able to hear what he has to say or won't be in attendance of what he has to say. I will get the audio from it, though. But we did find out from Elliott Wolf, who's, the Commanders, he's really their Patriots director of scouting. I almost say Commanders. He's the Patriots director of scouting. He's basically the de facto GM. They're picking at number 3, and well, from the sounds of it, they're open for business. Check it out.
We're open to anything, moving up, moving down. We're open for business in the first round and in every round. We have some holes we feel like we need to fill in the draft, and we're a draft and develop team. The more picks we have, the better. But if there's an opportunity to move up and strike, if the board kind of recommends it, then we won't be afraid to pull the trigger on that either.
So before the Patriots, the Commanders, they said they're staying at number 2. Adam Peters is very comfortable staying at number 2 and picking whoever they pick, whether that's Drake May or Jaden Daniels. But Elliott Wolf sounds very comfortable with trading back at number 3. So to me, it feels like if the Raiders are going to move up or want to move up, that's their way in right there at number 3. Now, if you do that, you've got to be comfortable saying, you know what, Jaden Daniels might not be there. That's the guy that they want. He might not be there at number 3. I think that you still have to make that move and try to make that move before the draft happens, because a team like the Vikings, who have all the draft capital in the world to get up to the top 3, top 4, will swoop in there and get them before you can get them. So I think that the Raiders have to make a move before next Thursday, but that's just my gut feeling. And if you remember from Daniel Jeremiah's first pre-draft conference call he had early in this offseason program, I actually asked him when we were talking about going from 13 to 3, what it would take for the Raiders to move from where they are right now to get up to 3 with the New England Patriots. Here's what DJ had to say. Check it out.
Yeah, the Raiders go up to 3. So here's your cost for the Raiders to go up to 3. It would be the 13th overall pick. It would be your first-round pick and third-round pick in 25 and your first-round pick in 26. So, it's not cheap. A couple ones. 13th this year and then 2 more. So 3 total ones as well as a third round pick, which, if you love a quarterback and he can be your guy for the next decade plus, I could get behind that. We'll talk about this at the combine on the coverage when we do some of these quarterback chats. The track record of the quarterbacks that got traded up for has not been good. There's usually a reason why teams are willing to move off that spot, and that hasn't traditionally bode very well for the teams that were aggressive coming up for guys. So one thing to keep in mind, but man, if you love it, and it's a bold move, but I don't know who their quarterback is right now. So if they don't land somebody in free agency, maybe that even makes them more inclined to go do that. You also have you have the Antonio Pierce connection with Jaden Daniels at Arizona State, so I'm sure they'll know him extremely well.
So there you go. I mean, again, I feel like that's the way in. If the Raiders want to get in there, they have to feel comfortable with Jaden Daniels or Drake May, right? Because one of those guys will be there for sure at number 3. So if they feel comfortable with both of those quarterbacks, and I know a lot of Raider Nation feels very comfortable with Drake May, maybe that's the way to go. The other side note to this, and it's just a side note, it's not saying that it's something that could happen. What if the Raiders were to move up to number 3 and then Jaden Daniels say, yeah, Commanders, I'm not playing for you. I refuse to play for you guys. I want to play for number 3. Trade me to number 3 or don't draft me. I could see that happening. People have asked me many times, and I said, I can't see that happening with the Raiders at 13. But if the Raiders are at 3, sure, I could see Jaden Daniels saying, hey, look, I don't like the way that you guys do things here, the Commanders. Me and Adam Peters don't get along. I don't like the fact that they brought in multiple quarterbacks. We all came in at the same time to visit the organization. Wasn't a fan of that. So, yeah, I'd rather go play with my buddy AP in Las Vegas with the Raiders. I know that Jaden wants to be a Raider. I know the Raiders want Jaden to be a Raider. I could see that happening. So it might be worth trading up to number 3 if, in fact, that's what Tom Telesco wants to do. I'm not saying that that's what's going to happen or that's what should even happen. But if that's what they think that they want to do a week out of the NFL draft, less than a week actually, maybe that's their way to get their quarterback in Jaden Daniels. But, again, it's a long shot. But I feel like that the crack is open. Elliott Wolf from the Patriots opened that door. The Cardinals are at 4. They're open for business. The Chargers are at 5. They're open for business. I even think the G-Men at 6 are open for business. But those 3 spots aren't going to get you who you want. So if the Raiders want to get to the top 3, they're doing business with the Patriots. They can do that. Washington doesn't sound like they're moving at all. You can get up to number 3 and potentially, again, it's a long shot. Maybe Jaden Daniels can kind of give the strong arm, give the Heisman to the Commanders and say, yeah, thanks, but no thanks. I'm going to Vegas. And if that's the case, I think he could pull that off, and I think the Raiders could pull that off. But again, that's a very long shot to make happen. But I thought that was pretty interesting after hearing what Elliott Wolf had to say about being open for business, knowing that they have a lot of holes to fill on that roster. Coming up in segment number 2, Daniel Jeremiah had his pre-draft conference call on Wednesday. Got some good sound bites that I want you to hear. We'll do that next here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about YahooFinance.com. Wouldn't it be great if you could see all your investment and retirement accounts in one place? With Yahoo Finance, you can consolidate your views from multiple accounts into one hub and access the expert analysis you need to tend to your entire portfolio with confidence. Believe it or not, I'm actually dibbling and dabbling into retirement at this stage. Not like trying to retire, but planning for retirement, something I never even thought. That's an R word I never thought that I would use. So let's get straight to the point. You want to grow your portfolio to deal with the rising cost of inflation, to pay off your debt or your mortgage, pretty much anything standing in the way of you and financial freedom, right? With Yahoo Finance, you can get access to the news, data, and tools that you need in order to help reach that financial freedom. When it comes to your financial future, you think you have done it all. You've saved, you've researched, you've invested all that you can. Now, you need to take those investments to the next level by using what every financial great uses. That's Yahoo Finance. Right now, for comprehensive financial news and analysis, visit the brand behind every great investor. Again, that's yahoofinance.com, the number 1 financial destination, yahoofinance.com. That's yahoofinance.com. All right, Raider Nation, here we go. Segment number 2 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. I want you to hear a few sound bites from Daniel Jeremiah, and I got plenty of them. He was 2 hours long, 2 hours strong, so we can continue this on Monday as well. Just getting you ready for all things NFL draft starting on Thursday from Detroit. I'll be there all week long. The next time you hear this show, it'll come generated from Detroit. Excited about that. But a few sound bites from DJ's pre-draft conference call, and the first one is about a correct approach to drafting your franchise quarterback. Like, there's a couple different ways to get it done. What does he feel is the best approach? Check it out.
Well, I think there's obviously the two, schools of thought, right? You get you build up the entire roster, then you drop the quarterback in the mix, and then you're good to go. And the other part of it is if you have a chance to, if you have a chance to get what you believe is a premier quarterback, even if the rest of your team isn't in place, you're going to have the pressure to go ahead and make that move. So I think there is definitely something to the superstar quarterback era that we're in right now, particularly in the AFC, where it's just hard, when you're in draft meetings and you're looking at it going like, these are the quarterbacks we have to run through. Like, we can build the most, the talented team and a balanced team. But at the end of the day, those big games, and especially if we were to get into the tournament, are going to come down to can our quarterback compete with their quarterback and make the throws you have to make to go win something. So I think that's kind of the pressure on these teams, is we don't have one of those guys. We're always in search of trying to find one. And I think the consistent playoff teams have, consistent quarterback play. So it's just there's about every, I looked it up a while ago. It feels like there's, maybe 2 teams a decade where they don't have a premier quarterback, but they have a loaded roster and everything goes perfect for them and they can go, win a Super Bowl. The rest of those Super Bowls seem to be won by, superstar quarterbacks, Mahomes being the one at the front of the line right now.
So that's a question that a lot of Raider Nation has asked. Is it better to build up the team and then drop the quarterback in there? Or is it better to, if you're in the position like the Patriots are, for example, at number 3, just go grab your quarterback and try to build around him? Couple different trains of thoughts there. It sounded like what Elliot Wolf was saying, and that you heard in segment number 1, that they'd be willing to build the team up and then go get a quarterback, as opposed to do it the other way. But they got to get the right offer. So, of course, it's going to cost, it's going to cost some draft capital. You heard what DJ had to say it was going to cost, and that was basically off the trade chart. It's going to cost a little bit more than that to do it now, just because, well, it's always going to be some inflation. They're always going to need a little bit of sugar on top of it. But multiple different ways to build up your team and draft your franchise quarterback, according to Daniel Jeremiah. I mentioned earlier in segment number 1 about Washington bringing in multiple guys. Here's Daniel Jeremiah on what he thinks about Washington bringing in those multiple quarterbacks that they did. They had a lot of different, prospects come into the organization, about 4 different quarterbacks: Jaden Daniels, Drake May, J.J. McCarthy, and even Michael Penix, all there in the building. So what do you think about that? Why did Washington do that? And where does he think they'll go at number 2 overall?
Look, I talked to Adam the other day about having those guys in there, and it's just they've done it in San Francisco, and there's value there. He didn't mention this, but I from other teams, been around other teams, that a lot of times that can be, as a way to cater to the owner. The owner's not necessarily going to be in town in the building on a day-to-day basis, so it's a way to be efficient, to bring all these guys in there, get a chance to meet with the owner. He can be around them and get a feel for them. So I think that's some of the philosophy behind bringing those guys in together. In terms of what they're going to do, I honestly, I've known Adam forever. He's never going to say a word. I don't think that's going to get out. I think all of us are going to find out who they're picking once they get on the clock and turn the card in there in Detroit. I've been connecting them to Drake May for a long time. I just felt like that fit there. I think about DQ going to a Super Bowl with Matt Ryan. And I think about, what Matt Ryan was coming out, strengths, weaknesses. And I thought it actually married up pretty well with Drake. So that who had been my connection there. But in talking to, coaches and executives around the league, they're like overwhelmingly convinced around the league that this is Jaden Daniels, that he's going to be the pick there at number 2. And it would, and I like Jaden Daniels a lot. I like all these 3 quarterbacks. So that seems to be the expectation from folks around the league. But again, I think anybody that says they know exactly what Washington's doing is lying, because I don't think Adam's saying a word.
So there you go. Something that, the 49ers have been doing, bringing all those different guys in at one time. I don't think that Jaden Daniels and his agent were big fans of that, just based off what I saw on social media. But again, it's social media, so you take it with a grain of salt. With that being said, right, I mean, you hear DJ talking about Drake May and how he feels like he actually fits better with what Dan Quinn would want, but everything he's hearing is Jaden Daniels is the guy at number 2. So at the end of the day, until we actually know, we really don't know. I mean, there's just no, set in stone. I know that the odds of Jaden Daniels going number 2 overall were really high at one point, and then all of a sudden they dropped. They took a big dip, and now all of a sudden Drake May is back into the mix. So again, man, the odds makers are switching things up. The guys that are, talking to different organizations are switching things up. I don't know, right? I try not to switch things up, but I feel like they're getting switched up all the time. So good thing that we don't have much more time to wait and find out exactly who goes where. I can't wait till it's all said and done, but clearly there's no set in stone answer yet when it comes to the Washington Commanders. And the final two sound bites I want you to hear have to do with the silver and black. The first question was asked about Michael Penix because Daniel Jeremiah mocked him to the Raiders at 13. So the question was posed to him, why Penix at 13? And if not quarterback, would it be a cornerback or offensive tackle as a couple options that the Raiders could have if they stick and pick at 13?
Sometimes you just simplify it, and I'm like, okay, we can argue, well, you have him. Where do you have him? Is he your 15th player, 20th player, or 34th player? Sometimes you can simplify it with two things. Number one, the quarterback is the most important position on the team. And is there an option where we're picking that's better than what we're playing with? And that's why I came, with the Penix thing. And Penix is he's my 34th player, I think, as of my last update. So 13, gosh, that feels like it's a little rich. But I'm like, I don't know. If you told me that I've got to move forward and I've got Gardner Minshew, who I think is a quality 2 who can get you out of a game or two, but I don't think is a starter. I don't think you want him as your starter for the long term. And Aiden O'Connell, who's shown some good things, but to me, there's just a huge talent gap there. I think Penix has so much more ability. So that's why I've made that spot there for him. And obviously in an ideal world, you'd trade back, get some extra picks, and nobody else takes him, and you get him and a little bonus there. But in terms of the other positions, you nailed it. I mean, corner and tackle, I think they'd have really good options there. I would love, Terrion Arnold or Quinyon Mitchell. I don't think you can go wrong with either one of those kids. Would be home run picks there. And then I think from a tackle perspective, that to me is like right around the sweet spot where you've got Fuaga, Faetanu, and Fashanu, the 3 Fs there. I think there's three guys that immediately upgrade your offensive line, and I don't know that there's a wrong pick there. I gave all 3 of the guys the same grade. They're 10th, 11th, and 15th on my list. So that's the decision that it's going to come down to. Do they feel like that's a big upgrade at the quarterback position, whoever that might be, or do you just do you address one of those other 2 big needs with guys that are ready to go? I think high floor players that you're not going to miss on for Antonio Pierce to get this team going.
So I like how he worded that. Right? Is Michael Penix better than Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew? And Daniel Jeremiah believes so. He said if you line those guys up, you feel a lot better than, with the talent that Michael Penix brings to the table than Aiden O'Connell and Gardner Minshew. At the end of the day, man, it's always going to be about medicals. It's never going to be about talent when it comes to Penix. He's one of the most talented dudes, and we know that. It's all about availability, health. Is he going to have it, right? That's bottom line. And I think we all know cornerback, offensive tackle, cornerback, whatever you want to say, those are the priorities, and obviously quarterback as well. The thing is they have a couple quarterbacks that they can go and start a game with if need be, and probably will regardless of if they get a quarterback at 3, if they get a quarterback at 13, or if they get a quarterback at 44. They'll probably start the season with one of those 2 dudes, Aiden O'Connell or Gardner Minshew. Final soundbite from Daniel Jeremiah. His pre-draft conference call is actually one I played on the show on Thursday, and that was my question about the risk versus the reward, about maybe taking the offensive tackle first and then trying to trade back into the back end of round 1 and grab Michael Penix. It's a gamble, but is the risk worth it when it comes to the reward?
I think that's a very reasonable and thoughtful strategy. I think if you came out of this, if you asked me what is the home run draft for the Raiders, and you told me that they got Fuaga with the 13th pick, and they came back into the bottom of the first round and they got Michael Penix, I'll be on the set in Detroit, tipping my cap to Tom Telesco and Antonio Pierce, because I think that's everything's gone perfect type draft for me. I think that gives you the hope of the future with Penix, and it addresses a huge need and would actually give Penix a better opportunity at success, or whoever's playing quarterback for that matter, by nailing that. So no, I think that's there's some, and if you love Penix, there's some risk involved there that maybe somebody else takes him. But man, if you pull it off and it works, I think that's a heck of a strategy.
So again, as he said, as I talked about it on Thursday's show, I'll salute the Raiders if they could pull that off, right? I mean, again, you do take the chance. Michael Penix might be gone. Seattle might jump up and get him. The Rams could jump up and get him. Team other could jump up and get him that we're not even talking about. The Cowboys could get him at 24, sit him behind Dak since there's no real resolution to that situation, right? I mean, there's other teams that could sit there and look and say, hey, you know, maybe that'll be a guy that we want to go get and, you know, sit him behind our guy. And so, I mean, it's definitely a risk. There's no doubt about it. But you know, it could end up paying off. Either they go in, you know, Dane Brugler's way where he put out the mock draft where he had Terrion Arnold at 13 and Penix at 29, or a guy like Fuaga at offensive tackle at 13 and then Penix later on in the draft. Or you can flip it up. Maybe get Penix at 13 and go back and get another offensive tackle or a cornerback, whatever the case may be. I went in my draft, obviously, I went with Terrion Arnold at number 13 and rolled the dice on Michael Penix, who happened to not get selected at all in round one. What says you? What's on your mind? Calls and texts right off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line 707-654-4693. That comes up next here on Friday's edition of the Locked On Raiders podcast. Before we get to that, though, I do want to tell you about the title sponsor of the show, which is Monopoly Go. And guys, I need you all to listen up for this big announcement. I've been tracking the leaderboards every single day, keeping my eye on the scores. You know how competitive I am, putting all my heart into it. And I'm super pumped to announce I'm finally on top. Nah, not really. I'm not really. It sounded good, though. Obviously, I'm talking about the hit mobile game Monopoly Go. You've probably heard of it. It's been downloaded over 150 million times. It's a great mobile twist on classic Monopoly. You can play anywhere, anytime. Explore hundreds of Monopoly boards from Vegas to Camelot to the moon, all while raking in a huge fortune. You could charge rent on iconic properties like classic Monopoly, charge your friends rent on your iconic properties, and a whole lot more. Or go after their Monopoly money by pulling bank heists and taking wrecking balls to their landmarks. Who doesn't have a lot of fun with that? But my favorite part is the leaderboard. You can see who's Monopoly's tycoon and who's gone bankrupt. Tell you the truth, your boy's gone bankrupt a couple times. But you don't have to do that. Get yourself in the game and on the charts. Download Monopoly Go now, free on the App Store and Google Play. Here we go, Raider Nation. Segment number 3 of today's Locked On Raiders podcast. Your calls and text straight off that Locked On Raider podcast voicemail line, 707-654-4693. Let's get a call in first from T. Wolvie in Nashville. Has a couple things he has to say about next week's draft, including quarterback and the trenches. Here he is, T. Wolvie calling out of Nashville.
What's up, Q? It's T. Wolvie here in Nashville. It's been a while since I called in, man, but you've been doing a great job with the show. Love the pick on the mock draft. Couple things. One, I think at quarterback we might be okay. I know we want to go get the splashy pick and we want to move up, and if we don't mortgage too much of the future, I'm all in on Jaden Daniels. You and I talked about that. But I think Telesco kind of showed his hand by getting Minshew, and I mean that by he's a big builder of the trenches, and if we can get an absolute dog at tackle, we can get some depth. Man, I mean, that's all a quarterback needs. I mean, if you're a great quarterback and you have no line, I mean, we've seen what that does. So, you know, I think he's got a plan. I think him and AP will be more than happy to go get a big-time offensive tackle and keep building the defense. You know, we're always fighting against the Chiefs, and the only way you take Mahomes out is with the defensive line, and we saw that he's doing that. That being said, I think we're kind of downplaying the type of impact that Tyree Wilson could have this year, man. If he makes that big jump with that athleticism and the size that he has, this could be an insane defense. And if we have that, we don't really need an absolute stud at QB. We just need a guy that doesn't make a lot of mistakes and can get the guys the ball when they're open. We saw AOC do that late in the year. We've seen Minshew do it over time, especially with the weapons that we have on offense. I think they might be all right. So I'm just coming in and saying I'm looking forward to the draft. I would love to get Jaden Daniels, of course, but, you know, trading up into the first round to grab a Penix or a Bo Nix, I hope it's not Bo Nix, but or something like that, or just waiting until the third or fourth to grab a Pratt or a Rattler and just, you know, roll the dice on them. I think they're going to go with that plan, barring a massive trade of some sort. But mortgaging the future for a QB right now with the defense that we have and being able to build the trenches, which is always going to win games, I think that's where they're going to go. It's what Telesco's done in the past. He's done a good job of it. You know, a lot of his players that he drafted didn't stay healthy. That's not his fault. But I think we're in a good direction. And the only way we take Mahomes down is with defense, especially the line. And we've already done that in free agency. Tyree comes along. We draft another stud or two. We'll be all right. All right, man. Thank you, bro. Thanks for everything you do. Peace out.
T. Wolvie, thanks for the call. It's been a minute, man. And there's a chance that the quarterback is either Minshew or O'Connell, right? I mean, talked about it. They could start a game on Sunday and they could win. I think that the Raiders will be comfortable with one of those two guys. And as I mentioned in segment number 2, there's a chance that one of those two guys does start the season regardless. As far as the defense goes and Tyree Wilson, man, he's a guy that I think could benefit a lot from the addition of Christian Wilkins and, of course, Malcolm Kuntz coming on late in the season last year. Now all of a sudden you have Max, you have Christian Wilkins, you have Malcolm Kuntz, you have Tyree Wilson, you got Jenkins, Butler, all those dudes on that Raiders defensive line. I believe Tyree Wilson now is allowed to kind of play wherever. He could play on the outside, he could play on the inside, take advantage of mismatches and just use his natural ability to kind of ease himself into it. Like everything Tyree Wilson does this year, especially being healthy, going into training camp as healthy instead of what he was last year, could end up being like a bonus. Because, again, I'm expecting Malcolm Kuntz to continue to take a step forward. We know what Max brings to the table. Wilkins is a game changer for everybody, right? I mean, and so Tyree Wilson, he could be a dude that you might see him line up next to Wilkins. You might see him line up next to Max. You might see him line up next to Kuntz. Like, I just think that you could put that dude wherever, and he could really show up and show out. That's what I'm excited for, to see what Tyree Wilson could bring to the game with all those other dudes on that defensive line. Again, could be an absolute game changer, what we see from that Raiders defensive line in 2024. T. Wolvie, thanks for the call, my man. It's always good to hear from you. Up next, got a text from JR on the 818. Hey, Q, it's JR from the 818 with the news about the Patriots being open to trade down. I don't think we'll be in striking distance of trading up to a top 3 talent in any of the next 3 years if we don't do it now. Every other first rounder we get will be at the end of the first, and we'll have a rookie quarterback on a cheap contract. It's a no-brainer. Trade up, grab your guy, and let Raider Nation sleep better at night. I say we put together a package of 3 ones, throw in a third rounder. If they don't like that, throw in Jacoby Myers and draft Brendan Rice. Wouldn't mind being able to use my Rice jersey again. That's JR in the 818 responding to Elliot Wolf saying that they're open for business at 3. And again, I felt like that's the way in. That's their in right there. You can go get your guy. And if you're comfortable with 2 guys like Jaden Daniels and Drake May, even better, right? But if you're only comfortable with 1, then you try to pull a move. Maybe even get to 3 and then hit up the Commanders and say, hey, you know that guy's not going to play for you. Let's just go on and make a swap. You go to 3, I'll go to 2, and we'll make it work. Like, there's different ways to approach it. If you're sitting there at number 3, I think that's the Raiders' way in. I think the Patriots have opened up the door and said, hey, come on in, but you got to strike quick. I wouldn't be mad at that. You said the 3 ones. Obviously, it's a pick swap of this year's 1, so they go from 13 to 3, and it's two ones next year and the year out, and then put some sugar on top of it. Cool, no problem, right? I mean, I'm with you. I'm not mad at it at all. I don't want to give up any players. I say that hold on to the players if you can, but man. I would give up the draft capital. I wouldn't even worry about it because, again, you get your quarterback. You feel really good about it, and this team has a lot of talent around it right now. It just makes that team that much better. Thanks so much for the text, my man. It's good to hear from you. Up next, got a call from Raider Joe. It's a quick one. He's calling to talk about what he'd like the Raiders to do in the first 3 rounds. Here he is, Raider Joe.
Hello. Hey, what's up, my boy? Yeah, this is Raider Joe. I mean, I've been a Raider fan since the 80s. Hey, I was trying to tell you, I hope we get the tackle in the first round, get the quarterback in the second round, and get a cornerback in the third round. And I hope we blaze a trail in the NFL because I know we could do it. We got the defense, we got the coach. All we need is the O-line and the quarterback to do some things just to win us some games and some close quarters. So, yeah, peace out. Raider Nation for life.
Raider Joe, thanks for the call. Offensive tackle, quarterback, and cornerback. And then just blaze. Just get after those Chiefs with those bloodthirsty Pirates that you got as far as the Raiders defensive line goes and defense in general. That works for me. I'm good with that, right? If that's the direction that you go, O tackle, cornerback, and then quarterback, or quarterback and then cornerback, yeah, that's fine. Do what you got to do. I mean, obviously, those are the areas of need. So wherever you get them, as long as you get the right guys, that's all that really makes, all that really matters at the end of the day. You just got to fill those voids. You want to get that right side solidified. Ideally, you get your quarterback, but don't just get a quarterback. If you're not comfortable with it, don't just get a guy just to get a guy, right? Get a guy that you're really comfortable with, the guy that you think could take this franchise from where it's at to another level, and then a cornerback, right? A guy that's got a little something in his neck that can go across from Jack Jones and Nate Hobbs. Yeah, that works too. So those are 3 areas that need to be addressed. When will they do it? Who knows? But it very well could go in the order that you just said, Raider Joe. Thanks so much for that call. Up next, got a text from Raider Jason in the 304. It says, hey, Q. Raider Jason from the 304. You're the best. Thanks for all the offseason coverage. Just a few pre-draft opinions. He's got 3 of them here. 1, take the tackle or corner at 13. Don't reach for a quarterback. Too much draft capital. But I wouldn't be sad to have Penix there, okay? 2, build the O-line with at least 2, maybe 3 picks, okay? And then 3, take a sneaky good running back. Just win, baby, and go Raiders. That's Raider Jason in the 304. The running back, I'm glad you addressed the running back position. I'm looking at round 4, 3 or 4, late 3, round 4 as a sweet spot for a running back, right? Whether that's Blake Corum from Michigan, Marshawn Lloyd from USC by way of South Carolina. Those are a couple that pop off the top of my head. There's obviously multiple running backs that can get it done. I do think that that's a sweet spot for them around, later in the 3rd round and in the 4th round, probably be a really good spot for them. Taking a couple offensive linemen makes sense. And, if you can get a top flight cornerback, perfect. Go do that as well. I'm good with that. So you got a good game plan right there. I think we're all kind of on the same page of what the Raiders need to do next week. The biggest question is, how do they go about doing what they need to do? Thanks so much for that. I do appreciate you. Let's see. Got time for a couple more. How about Jay in the 209? He's calling about the Raiders sitting at 13 and then potentially moving up in the draft. Here he is, Jay from the 209.
Hey, what's up, Q? This is Jay from 209. So this whole quarterback thing with the Raiders, man, I'm like, we're sitting at 13. I don't want to give up that much draft capital to go up to like 3 or 4 or 2, whatever. What I'm thinking is like, there's going to be 4 or 5 quarterbacks selected before we even pick. Probably 3 offensive tackles, a tight end, 3 wideouts. I mean, you're looking at, on a small, like on the low ends, 4 quarterbacks, 3 receivers, that's 7, 3 tackles, 10, tight end. That gives us the number 2 pick right there. I mean, we have the opportunity to pick anybody we want on the defensive side of the ball. And that's what our coach, that's what he knows in his first draft. So I say we sit pat and draft a really good quarterback.
Jay in the 209 is not a fan of trading up. Too much draft capital. Okay, that's cool. If you sit there and let the board fall to you, that's something that Tom Telesco is, known to do. A lot of times he'll attack the trenches. He could go for a top-flight cornerback. Another reason I took Terrion Arnold at 13 is the relationship that Arnold and AP have. I feel like that they have a really tight relationship, right? I mean, just the interaction that they had at the Combine, the interaction that they had at Alabama's Pro Day, it just seems like it's next level. It seems like that's an AP type guy. So if they're going to get a cornerback and it's, they're wondering which one to get between Mitchell and Arnold, I think the relationship that's built between Arnold and AP is what's going to end up being the end all be all. That's what will separate the two. That's another reason why I went with Terrion Arnold at number 13 as opposed to Quinyon Mitchell. So there's things that they can do, right? And so you can get a defensive. You can get some defensive studs. You can do there's a lot of different options. Obviously, we talked about it quite a bit. So thanks so much for that call. Definitely appreciate you. And that's all I really got time for on today's show. Still got a text from Luke in the 408. We'll get that on Monday. Raider Izzy, I'll get that call. I got a text from Assassin's Ghost as well. So we'll get all that plus more news and notes. What do we collect over the weekend? What am I hearing from Detroit? All that good stuff. But I'll tell you one thing. The show will come to you live from Detroit starting on Monday, as we'll be there all week for the NFL draft. And who knows what we'll come up with? Who knows what the Raiders will come up with when it's all said and done? But cannot wait to be there. Cannot wait to bring you all the action and sights and sounds and more here on the Locked On Raiders podcast. So until Monday, Raider Nation, have a fantastic weekend. Take care of yourself. Take care of your family. Love on your family. Most importantly, as always, just win, baby.